Greetings, everyone. It is Gleekon back again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft, and I'd like to thank you for joining me. On our last episode, we finished off Loch Modan, quite a little bit of a zone there. A short video with just a few quests with our gnomish mage Maleficent. She's becoming a little icon of this channel. She ended up taking a long time because we had to find some group up content and do much higher level elite quests, and even with a group of 3, I mean, part of it was party composition. We had 2 mages and a rogue. And none of us we were all 4 levels below the level of the boss. It just took its time. We eventually got a 4th, a pally joined us, and then we were able to handily do it. She flew back. She's got some things to do off camera. She's going to be moving on to Redbridge for a short while before I about face and turn her back into the wetlands. We also have been reading the Dungeons and Dragons books as an alternating break in between each episode, and we are on one of the last few books in this series. It's been quite a long time because it started with the Warcraft world, Dungeons and Dragons setting, and then it jumped over to World of Warcraft. And now we're getting near the end of the Burning Crusade time, and as a franchise, as an institution, Blizzard at this point was starting to look forward to Wrath of the Lich King, and it really feels like the interest in this Dungeons and Dragons setting kind of died off. I think it was shortly after this time that they then released the World of Warcraft board game, which we've talked about in previous chapters, and that was a very cool thing. But we're going to turn our tack to something different once we finish these books. But for now, we're going to continue the Alliance Player's Guide with the 5th chapter. The last one we read was about magic. This one's about technology, and it begins with something saying, click, click, boom, so stay a while and listen. Yeah, so I did want to put this out last night, but the last episode we did was over 2 hours long, and by the time I finished, it was a work night for me, and Mrs. Gleekon was sort of looking at the watch like, are you sure you want to squeeze one more episode in? So for the sake of the peace within my domicile, I put that off for today. We're going to bust this one out today, and I'm going to get my Millicent episode off camera, or my work for Millicent done off camera, so I should be able to put another episode out tomorrow with our Tauren, as he finally shows what I've already done a couple times with the next part of the Crossroads, the Barrens. What is technology? In simplest terms, it is science applied to practical use. Thus, by this definition, a simple can opener is a technological device. Heck, anything, really, in some ways, a stick is a technological device. A more accurate description is that technology is the system by which an entire society provides for the wants and needs of its population. I don't know that I like that definition best. Thus, the dwarves of Ironforge are said to be more technologically advanced than the Tauren of Mulgore, who are themselves far more advanced than, say, kobolds or trogs. Technology tends to improve as the demand for it increases. A society might go decades or even centuries without a major advancement before some bright inventor comes up with something that alters the fundamental way things are done. For example, wagon wheels help move heavy loads from place to place, while wheels of stone grind meal into flour. Put notches in a wheel, connect them together, and you have gears that can drive even more complicated devices. All too frequently, war is the primary driver of technological advancements. The Ironforge dwarves spearheaded this trend, developing gunpowder and firearms as a way to achieve an edge against their foes in combat. Flying machines, originally just curiosities or at best scouting tools, are now being outfitted with flak cannons and bombs. Who knows where these advancements will lead? And I think it's kind of hard to parse through whether dwarves or gnomes really drove that, because certainly in Warcraft 2 it was gnomes, but the dwarves really they pilot the flying machines, but there's no canon that necessarily says those things weren't inspired by, if not directly built by, the gnomes. It says, although there are always individual exceptions, various races of Azeroth tend to view technology in different ways. So this is a long chapter, and like we did on the last one, the interesting stuff we'll read through, if it's really worth reading verbatim, we're gonna just skim through quite a bit of it. All right, but I like this part, the relationship with technology that each race has. We're gonna read through this page or 2 of content. Ironforged dwarves are perfectly comfortable with technology, rapidly accepting and absorbing new inventions into their society. As dwellers in a tight-knit underground city complex, they exchange new ideas easily and freely. They're probably the best capital in terms of just convenience and layout. of all the other ones, and it's why we've essentially had multiple other expansion capitals based around that idea, and in a way, Undercities based around the same kind of hub concept as well, although it has a little bit more inconveniences due to different like elevations. Rarely do dwarves keep inventions to themselves. Unlike goblins, they aren't terribly concerned with the accumulation of wealth and power. Again, agree to disagree. They prefer to use technology to improve their lives as well as the lives of their fellow citizens. Nowhere is this better seen in the creation of new devices to defend their population from threats both internal and external. Dwarves don't intend to have what happened to Nomergon happen to them. Dwarven inventions include gunpowder, firearms, siege works, war golems, and other weapons of war. No coincidence also that these inventions are tightly connected to the same sort of inventions that came from the keepers. Elves. Both high elves and night elves disdain technology, primarily because they consider it an inherently destructive art. There's a lot of truth in that. The Venture Company's near-complete annihilation of sections of the Stone Talon Mountains, the Charred Vale in particular, with lumber cutting machines, stands as mute testimony to this belief. Still, a few elves dabble in the art, generally focusing on problem-solving devices instead of weaponry. Few elves employ firearms over good strong bows. Elvish inventions include the self-heating cooking pot, soft light hanging lamp, and aquadynamic fish attractor, a fishing lure. It does say there are several tech mods and devices that make use of the swifter immediate action, which is discussed in the More Magic and Mayhem book way back. That's a few books back for us. I would also say this makes me think of where they're talking about the destructiveness of technology. This is kind of an aside here. There's a comic book series, if any of you like to read graphic novels or comics or just are readers in general, by Neil Gaiman called The Sandman. It's a book that was a series that came out in the 90s. I'm sure most of you have heard of it, but if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's not like any other comic series that I know of. It's not really superhero based or anything like that. It's my favorite graphic novel ever. I have every single one, and I routinely pick them up and reread them. I'm probably in the middle of rereading all of them for the 20th time right now. I just kind of keep them on the counter, and once a week I'll read through an episode or an issue or whatever. But the conceit of that book series is that there are 7 endless, and each one of them is a central aspect of existence. Destiny, Dream is the title character, death, destruction, so on and so forth. And each of these aspects has a kind of a dark side, or a yin and a yang, a heads and a tails to what exists. So with Dream, it's nightmare. With death, death is required for life, and there's delirium, and there's delight, and so on and so forth. Well, destruction kind of has this other side to him that is creation. And in that way, they really get into some philosophical conversations about how destruction is a necessary aspect of creation, and much that is destroyed is the kind of seed in what leads to further creation, and just this, you can't have one without the other sort of thing. And I think that in much the same way, technology has that aspect. It's definitely inherently destructive in the sense that it's consumptive. It often consumes and destroys what we would consider raw materials. But it's undeniable that it definitely creates a lot of other things. So I can see the dichotomy between dwarves and elves kind of reflecting that relationship with technology. And back to the story. Gnomes. Gnomes are innovative thinkers and are responsible for a vast variety of inventions, including more than a few that are commonly attributed to dwarves. Although a diminutive people, gnomes think big, often producing designs far too complex to ever be realized. To gnomes, technology is a way of life. Even gnomes who take on other trades often tinker in their spare time. Because of their innate curiosity, they produce a wide variety of devices that are interesting or amusing, but otherwise useless or impractical. While others might shake their heads at such folly, the gnomes value all invention, no matter how unimportant it might seem. Unlike the dwarves, gnomes think of technological items individually instead of socially. Where a dwarf might envision a force field generator as a way to protect his people from invasion, a gnome would look at the device as a way to keep him dry in bad weather. However, since their evacuation from Gnomeregan, many gnomes focus on their efforts on producing devices that will help them recover their homeland. Among the well-known gnomish devices are the World Enlarger, Netomatic Projector, and Harm Prevention Belt. Those are all things I think you can actually get. World Enlarger is, of course, a shrink ray. Humans. While many humans have become adept at working with new technologies, the vast majority of humankind views engineering as little more than a curiosity. Most continue to believe that polished steel armor and a strong, well-crafted sword are better than any complicated technological device could ever be. Furthermore, magic is so ingrained in the human psyche that the thought of science ever surpassing the mystic arts is laughable. Still, this attitude is slowly changing, for rifle troops and grenadiers appear in human military forces, albeit as irregulars. Also, a few arcanists supply technology to their own experiments, producing simple combinations of magical and technological power, the technomage that we read about. Where this trend may lead is yet unknown. Those inventions the humans have produced tend to be simple and straightforward, without the complexity of a gnomish device or the dangerous instability of a goblin creation. Some examples are spell power goggles, the voice amplification modulator, and the parachute cloak. Okay, so we're going to read a little bit of a sidebar about goblins versus gnomes before we get into the various tech mods that we're just going to skim through. Goblins and gnomes have long had an intense rivalry. This competition has fostered a number of inventions designed specifically to show up the opposition. Nowhere is this better seen than at the racetrack in the Shimmering Flats, where the two sides rush endlessly to develop new racing vehicles, ones with little practical use anywhere else in the world. Goblin technology tends to be radical and dangerous, always pushing the ragged edge of feasibility. Goblins have short attention spans as a rule, so if they can't get something to work right away, they either give up or move on to something else that attracts their attention. Goblin workshops are littered with half-finished projects and the scavenged remnants of inventions that didn't pan out. While this attitude gives them more time to work on new and promising creations, who knows how many potentially valuable projects have been left gathering in dust in some back corner. In contrast, gnomes overplan new projects, producing blueprints and schematics that can take longer to make than the device itself. While this cautious attitude results in higher quality projects and a greater success rate, it often takes so long that cost overruns creep in. While the goblin would scream and flee at the mere thought of a cost overrun, a gnome simply shrugs and presses on. If a project fails to work correctly the first time, a gnome will continue to tinker with it, while a goblin would usually give up and move on to something else. Thus, gnomish items have a very low failure rates compared to goblin items. Both sides scoff at the other as taking the wrong attitude towards engineering. Goblins laugh at the way gnomes spend far more time and money on a project than they'll ever hope to recoup, while the gnomes shake their heads at the way goblins are always blowing themselves in their laboratories to pieces. Still, both sides have their advantages and disadvantages, so neither can be said to be the right way to do things. Some tinkers choose to study the ways of gnomish or goblin engineering in more detail, becoming specialists in that race's way of thinking and designing technological items. A character need not be a goblin or gnome to specialize in that race's engineering methodology. In fact, it's not unheard of for a goblin to give up on his dangerous ways and embrace gnomish engineering, or vice versa. The gnomish engineering specialist and goblin engineering specialist feats in Chapter 2 represent this specialization. So far, the goblin-gnome rivalry has yet to erupt into fighting, but the possibility exists. Such a technology war would have consequences undreamt of. Alright, now we're going to get into tech mods. It says they were introduced in More Magic and Mayhem. The members of the Alliance are the primary users of the mods listed here, although non-Alliance races, particularly people like goblins that are already going to screw with all these whatever, are allowed to use some. You have to pass a use tech device check to use them. Okay. So there are weapon tech mods. There's the auto healer. It just automatically injects with potion. That's cool, I guess. It works on a handheld weapon. So I guess you're putting it on and then, yeah, it says you can kind of, like you're wielding your sword and then you press the button and the sword injects a potion in your hand or whatever. That's cool. There's Shanger's Scalder. Let's see. It says it is someone found a broken weapon and they filled it with super heated coils wrapped in water, and it produces basically gouts of steam, which adds fire damage to your weapon. Although it does make you walk around steaming and making a tea kettle sound, so you can no longer use as much stealth. Here's a list of all the tech mods for whatever. It doesn't even look like they're all weapon, but I do think they are all weapon. Okay, there's the spring-loaded blade, and that's the picture we're seeing here. It looks like either a human or a night elf or blood elf, and they're shooting a blade out. Reach weapons and large creatures can be challenging, so you can essentially increase your weapon's reach, but it does a little bit less damage. There is the super sticky coat. Basically, it's a glue or tar that goes on your weapon, and it makes it super sticky, and so basically it looks like it's making the person you get covered in sticky, so your sword is sticking more to them. So every time you hit, it gets harder and harder to hit. But all opponents have a harder and harder chance to hit the person who's wielding it. I guess because their thing is like sticking to all of their weapons. Okay. Yeah. Ultralight is basically an ultralight type of weapon. You get extra attack and damage. It makes things like thorium weapons light and hollow. Yeah, their things weigh half weight. I don't see a downside. Yeah, cool. So you just use this to make your weapons. I guess it would only be good if that mattered to you. Do you need your weapons to be half as light? But it does give you extra damage as well, so why not use it? All right, so then there are armor tech mods as well. Okay, so there's Agile. It is a hydraulic assist that you put in your armor that gives you more of an ability to tap into your natural agility bonus. Like you put this on heavy armor, and now you get some extra. You can tap into that dexterity bonus that you might have. Charging armor. So you kind of crouch and charge it up like Sonic the Hedgehog, and then it lets you do a charge. Yeah. It propels you forward into a big charge. Look, here we read about what this is. It looks like he's blocking a fireball or something. There's an extend a shield weapon. So it's like a shield, and it unfolds it and makes it big. So it makes it harder for you to attack because it's so unwieldy, but it gets a much bigger bonus to armor class. There's reactive resistance. So you turn it on and pick something like fire, cold, acid, whatever, and then you gain resistance to that attack. And the more that thing is used against you, the more your resistance builds up. Maybe that's what we're seeing right here. It kind of looks like he's pushing this button and he's able to dodge the fire. So that's cool. And there's a stability tripod. This can only be applied to heavier types of armor, and it makes you like kind of root down like a tripod, and you have extra stability. So kind of like a dwarf does. All right, there are ring tech mods. There's a burn beam. So you shoot a little fire beam out of your ring, kind of like a Green Lantern ring, and it shoots fire damage. It looks like it's just got like one shot, or it can just flash like a flashlight. A featherlight ring, you can use it while falling to slow your fall. A stabilizer ring, it allows you that if you fall unconscious, it will kind of stabilize you so that you don't have to pass those health checks. And a vapor vacuum, exactly like what it sounds like. It can suck vapor in, giving you extra saving throw against gas-based attacks. And the warning eye. It has 4 powers. It has a target watch, so you can basically point it at one person and you get extra armor class against them. It has an oversight, which lets you get advantage on spot checks. Closer look increases your search checks like a magnifying glass. Or alert. Let's see. It doesn't really say what the wearer must hold their hand. They can't use the ring hand regardless of the mode. I don't understand what it's saying. The wearer must hold his hand behind his back. Oh, but he can't be flanked. I see. So you're using it like a second eye that will make it to where you can't be flanked. And then finally, wondrous item tech mods. Actually, I don't know that that's finally. These are just randos. Iron grips. You draw a weapon and you get an extra. Basically, it protects you from being disarmed. You're like clamped onto your weapon. Power springs allow you to get extra bonuses to movement and jump, but they make you walk slower. So yeah, you get to choose. Do you run faster or walk slower? But then they slow you down until you snap them off. And shock tip fingers, probably exactly what they sound like. They let you touch to shock. Zip. But if you get immersed in water while wearing them, you shock your whole dang self. So those are all the mods. Now we're going to talk about actual tech devices. These look like, based on our first title, that they're going to be based on race. So there's dwarven tech devices. There's the anything mortar. It is a mortar that lets you shoot, I guess. What's it shooting? Any diminutive or smaller object is what it shoots. And then when you do it, it doesn't really say what. It says it deals 1d2. So if you're shooting a living creature, it does hurt them. It can shoot grenades. It can shoot frogs. It can shoot. So I guess it's up to the DM to kind of decide what this thing is shooting and how much the damage. What's the effect of shooting said thing? Okay, there's flash bomb, just like a standard grenade, but it deals no damage. It just dazes creatures. Yeah, we got a pretty long list here. And before we get into the next one, we're going to read this story sidebar. Gasping for breath, Tardor put out a hand, stabilizing himself on a twisted tree trunk. A trickle of blood flowed down his face, dripping in front of his left eye, but he barely noticed. "Is it over?" asked Montegro from nearby. His voice, too, came in ragged gasps, but at least he was alive. The same couldn't be said for most of the rest of the caravan, which lay in ruins all about the pair. Most of the other guards had been slaughtered, but the civilians aboard the wagon had hidden themselves well. The bodies of dozens of savage trolls lay strewn about, mute testimony to which side had eventually prevailed. "I think so," said Tartar wearily, turning to survey the battlefield. A few of the wounded were gathering themselves up, but most of the men were clearly dead where they lay. Nearby, a troll coughed. Montegro stabbed it through the throat, an afterthought. A soft rattle attracted their attentions. Both mercenaries looked up to the distant hillside from the direction the raid had come. On the distant, dusk-harkened horizon, the tiny figure of a wounded troll was visible, his back to the guards. In another few moments, he would crest that mountainside and be gone. "Damn," muttered Montegro. "He's going to bring reinforcements, and then we're all dead, man." "Not if I can help it." Tartar stepped over to the corpse of his horse, reached under the saddle blanket, and withdrew a long-barreled rifle. From his side, Montegro gave a whistle. He'd seen dwarven guns before, but never one like this. Its metal surface was charcoal black, as if it had been dipped in open flame. "I got this off a dead dark iron back on the burning steppes," said Tartar. "Doesn't use gunpowder, but phlogiston. Expensive stuff, and I only have enough for a few more shots. So I save it for special occasions. Like this." He lifted the rifle up to his shoulder, pointing it at the distant figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. Tartar pulled the trigger, nearly deafening the survivors with the gun's loud bang. But in that same instant, the troll in the distance stiffened and collapsed. "Damn," gasped Montegro. "That was at least half a mile." "Yeah, now you see why I use it for special occasions," Tartar replied with a grin. "Now come on, let's get the hell out of here." Cool, and I bet you, and that's basically referring to what we're going to read about right now, the Dark Iron Rifle. He basically described exactly what it does. It uses phlogiston, fires rifle bullets, and it's a pretty strong thing. It doesn't, again, oh, I see. It does pretty good damage and very strong hit, crit, and a very strong range, but it can malfunction and explode. Look at this. They show him getting sniped. Okay, a flame deflector. Cooling elements and thick pads that you wear on your shoulders. And it gets extra damage and save against fire but it's kind of blocking your ability to see, so it makes spot checks harder. All of these things take some kind of fuel. This also takes phlogiston. Hyper radiant flame deflector. So it's just like a regular one, except it bounces it back, and it gives even more of a penalty to listen and spot. There's the force reactive disc. So this is a full-size big round tower shield with a bunch of metal studs. Okay. And anytime someone oh, I see. If you do a particularly bad hit, if you roll a natural 1 when you hit it, then you take like massive electricity damage. Or, yeah. So you get yourself shocked from it. An ice reflector gets resistance to cold. And let's see, it's a cape basically. A gyro freeze ice reflector is a suit of armor basically. It's basically like scale mail, and it gives you extra resistance to the cold. Oh, the spell turning against cold and resistance, so it's even stronger. Personal defense shield. It's like a ring of protection around your body. Excuse me. It's kind of basically like a force field. It gives extra armor and deflection bonus. A Cephorium charge. It's like a bomb, super powerful. You can detonate it. And we use some of those in quests on WoW. And the Cephorium detonator is exactly that. You have to use the detonator to blow the charge. Okay, there's also gnomish technological devices. Here we have a picture of a little robot. There's an Alarmabot, again, that's from the game. It walks around, and it is not stealthy at all, but it sees motion. So it has a mega bonus to spot check, where it then yells intruder alert. Cool. Chaos Burst Amulet. So, of course, it's an amulet, and you roll... let's see, what does it do? It gives you a random benefit, and here's the table. You roll the dice, but if you get higher, you get a penalty instead. The more you use it, the greater the chance of getting a penalty instead, until you kind of let it cool down. But it gives you bonus to one of your stats, to speed, armor class, or damage and skill cap if you get a really good one. Okay, there's Gravity Negator. You make whoever's wearing it becomes basically weightless. So that's cool, but I guess you could float up. But there are possible effects half the time. If it doesn't function normally, you rise higher than selected, or you go super far, or it just suddenly cuts out and you fall to the ground. Interesting little ring, little Willy Wonka-esque. The Netto Magic Projector, it shoots a net. Some of those are in some quests. Portable Vehicle Transformer. So, yeah, you make a vehicle tiny and you can carry it around, then take it back out. Gnomish Rocket Boots, those are on a quest too. They're pretty tough to use, but if you can successfully use them, yeah, like these, you're making yourself have some like jet skates. 100 extra feet per round of movement. But if you don't move a certain amount of, at least half that, 50 feet per round, you basically bust yourself up into the ground. Okay. Or if it's on rough ground, it's only 80 feet instead of 100. That's cool. Look at this little kobold getting hit by that net. That's cool. Gnomish Shrink Ray, that's a very common one. The person gets shrunken if they fail their save. And it can function normally, but it might backfire and shrink the user. It might accidentally grow the person, or it might create a big AoE shrink hole. Time Hopper is a small chaos engine around a time emerald. Okay, so 40% chance it slows time around you. So you're basically under the effect of like a haste spell. It can be mega haste on a roll of 5 to 6. 7 to 8, you stop time. And then you basically find out what's going to happen, and then you get to relive it. You get to re-roll any die roll you want to do because you basically know everything that's about to happen. Or you can have that happen for 2 rounds, or it just jars you, it shifts you in time and stuns you. It's an interesting little thing. Okay, then there's the Ultra Safe Transporter. So this is basically a teleporter, but on a 30% chance, you transport, but your clothes and stuff don't. 20% chance you do successfully teleport, but you get hurt. You slam into something when you get there. 20% chance you do get there, but you're not exactly there. You're up in the air and farther away. 10% chance you teleport to the exact correct teleportation pod. 10% chance just randomly teleport miles away. Or finally, you get an evil twin. For 2 hours, basically you're split. At some point, not within 2 hours, you'll be split, and there will be an evil twin. I see. It will just be like in the same body as you, and they will cause you to automatically fail a save. Then there's the Gnomish World Enlarger. It's a big shrink ray. We're going to have a story that goes with this. You use it to shrink to make yourself be better at sneaking around, basically. But I like it's just cute that they call it the World Enlarger. All right, let's read a side story, probably based on that. Zur sighed and plopped down on the hard wooden bench that lined the back of the cell. Well, now we're in for it, the Night Elf Rogue said, shaking his head sadly. They've got us, for sure. I can't get that lock open, and these bars are way too strong to bend. His companion, the human arcanist Valisha, paced back and forth warily. Yeah, they searched us pretty well, she remarked, a trace of a smile crossing her harsh red lips. A bit too well, if you get my meaning. Bastards. It's your fault for wearing robes like that, commented Zur. You humans, given to your baser instincts, a bit too much for my taste. Yeah, you were asking for it. Come on, buddy. Well, you must like us, or you wouldn't spend all your time in Theramore, the warlock answered. Besides, dressing like this has its advantages, as I'm sure some of your own women know, what with them dancing all the time. For instance, sure the gods took all your thieving tools and all my spell components, but they didn't take everything. What do you mean? He stood up again, eyeing her curiously. What did they miss? The smile on her face was more pronounced now. Just this little thing, she replied, withdrawing a tarnished silvery disc that fit neatly in her hand. What is that? Sniggered Zur. What are you going to do, pretty yourself up some more? Alicia snorted. This is something that Gnome Tinker taught me about. It looks like nothing, but it's actually exactly what we need. Now stand back and watch this. He took a step backward. No, several steps, for Valicia's little toys often didn't work quite as she expected. Holding the silver disc in her hand, she gave the top a quick twist, and then something totally unexpected happened. She shrank. 1 second, she was head level with his chest as usual. The next, she had dwindled down to half that size, shorter than his waist. Zur's mouth dropped open and dangled limply for a few seconds while Valicia just grinned up at him in satisfaction. See? She chuckled in a high-pitched voice, stepping over to the bars. She slipped her tiny frame through the gaps, walked across to the opposite side of the room, climbed onto a chair, and retrieved the keys to their cell from the nail on which they hung. When she got back, he was still standing frozen, staring down at her in amazement. Only when she tossed the keys at him did he react, catching them instinctively. At least, she said, still giggling at his befuddlement, they didn't put us in a cell built for gnomes. Okay, neat. There are also other random technological devices. There is a goblin bomb dispenser. You strap it to your shoulder, and it beeps, bomb ready, and you can chuck that puppy. And obviously, the malfunctions are exactly what you would expect. Cat's Eye Ultra goggles help you see better, give you low light vision, dark vision, heat vision. Just depends on kind of like what you tune them up to. Light protection. So, and I'm guessing each of these things, requires they requires different fuel, and the malfunction would be it would stick in whatever mode, and you can only see in that mode until you fix it. But they sound pretty useful. All right, we got another side story. The horn sounded, and as one, the orcs bellowed their war cries. Ook was on his feet along with them, racing down the short hill towards the men below. There were no spellcasters or special forces among them, just foot soldiers and 3 or 4 officers in elaborate plate armor. Ook angled toward these, ignoring the cowering wagon driver and whinnying horses. Out of the corner of his eye, the orc saw someone moving amid the boxes, but whoever it was didn't step forth. A cowardly civilian to be slaughtered later. The battle began. Several humans died almost instantly, but others rose to take their places, obviously well drilled in defensive maneuvers. Ook slashed the throat of a man who blocked his way. Other humans dropped here and there, as did some of his own troops, yet the orcs had the advantage of numbers. Or did they? While the warrior part of Ook hacked and slashed at his foes, the detached section of his brain that monitored the battlefield spotted more humans popping up seemingly from nowhere. The sun had set, so lighting was poor, and his attention was focused on swordsmen in his path, but he could still sense new targets cropping up all about. Despite their deaths, the humans' numbers hadn't decreased much, if at all, yet already 1/3 of Ook's force was down. He sensed, with the mounting panic in his orcs, their throaty yells were faltering all about, morale was shaken, and if he didn't do something soon, it would break. Ook knew what to do. He bellowed forth a frightening battle yell and stepped toward 2 of the most recent reinforcements, who were strangely still. With a mighty blow, he cleaved off their heads, but instead of the satisfying squirt of blood, he saw only broken wood bouncing on a spring. Treachery. He shouted a warning, but it was too late. His men were already pulling back, drawn by the retreat horn. Ook cut down one final guard, a real one this time, spat upon him and rushed away. The surviving humans wisely didn't pursue. With gasping breaths, he returned to the staging area. "Tricks," he muttered with a growl. "Toys of wood. That's all they were." "Yes," agreed Gorg, a trickle of blood coursing down his scarred face. "And the supplies. Look." Ook followed the sergeant's gaze down the hill. The wagon stuffed with food crates and barrels was aflame, lighting the path in a crimson glow. Yet the human warriors were already putting out the fire, rescuing the vast majority of their cargo from destruction. Failure, thought Ook morosely. Not total failure, for some of the supplies were lost, but a defeat nonetheless. Somewhere among the humans, probably one of the unarmored ones, was the tinker who'd fooled Ook with his false warriors. That was an insult he would not soon forget. One day, the orc thought, we will raise that town, and that tinker will perish by my hand. One day. One day soon. Okay, so that's a little decoy. Parachute cloak, exactly what it sounds like. Portable target dummy, that's what we had just now that we just read about. You basically make these little dummies. They have armor class of 10. I think in Dungeons & Dragons it'd be a lot harder to utilize that, but in the game it's nice because they sort of like taunt and distract the enemy. Advanced portable target dummy. It even smells and looks, so it basically increases the chance that people think it's real. Spell power goggles extreme. It empowers your spells. Cool. If it malfunctions, then you cast your spell on yourself. Oh, and here's the last page of this chapter. Right? Yeah. And that it ends with the voice amplification modulator. It goes around your neck, and your voice changes into vibrations. So I see. It allows you to cast spells even when silenced 75% of the time. Okay. Neat. All right, so we've read half of the book, and the next part we know is where we're going to start. Let's just take a peek. Yeah. So the next one is where, for the next 2 chapters, where this book will slow down, because this is where we're really going to get into reading every page, and getting deep into the history and lore of the Alliance and the races, and it's the best part of these books. So I'm looking forward to that, but it will slow us down as we push our way through this book. But hey, everyone, thank you so much for watching and for listening. I really enjoy doing this with you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Either way, we got another episode in the pipe, 5x5. And I'll see you next time on Lore of Warcraft.